Anybody could go in that park and be comfortable. You could tell what music a person listened to or what bands they followed by how they were dressed. And you'd see mohawks, and you'd see skinheads, and you'd see grunge. You don't have that much anymore.
It's location one, and it has an energy. And I guess it's always had an energy. It's always been super eclectic and weird.
Tompkins right away just became this place where it was easier to find people with common ground. Like, it still takes on this life outside of what a traditional skate park does.
It's downtown at that time, and there was so much magic. And I can only hope that everybody gets to experience a time like that.
People coming together, like just making something happen. Yeah, it technically belongs to the city, but it belongs to the people.
Kids are still doing what kids are doing. Nothing's going to stop people from having fun and being reckless and being self-destructive and being wild. And I think that's what New York, to me, that's why I came to New York. I connected with that from visiting here in the 90s, coming here, and just felt like, whatever the city, like, whatever the energy that it put out, it grabbed me instantly. And, being here when I was, it just like it felt like we were all trying to kind of maybe not reinvent ourselves, but trying to figure, like, we had an idea of who we were, delusional or not, and we were gonna, be that. We thought we were that, and this energy that was like, I kind of see my own. I can only speak for myself, but like it was crazy. I was never going to be that photographer.
Were you trying to be?
I mean,
at the time, were you actively trying to pursue photography, or was it a thing you were doing? Like, you were just out all the time with a camera. What was it like?
I was out all the time with a camera as a job. Plus, I was also because that was one of the jobs I did. But I also love going out. But I was a photographer. I was shooting small stuff. I was shooting. I had a monthly column in Lucky magazine. Nothing to belittle.
What about the stuff with Vice?
I shot for Vice. But that was the first stuff I did when I first got here. Not the very first, but that was the first thing that wasn't connected to my sister. The first job that I got, and I got it through my sister, but it wasn't like her hiring me. She was friends with those guys. It's like Ryan put me on. Actually, so I guess I might have got it through myself because Ryan was the one who put me on at Vice. I wanted to be a photographer, but I didn't know how to. And I still to this day, there's certain aspects that I see, skill sets that my more successful friends have that I don't really have. It's a shortcoming that gets in the way, but, I'm still working, and I'm still making art. And for as much as I'd love to be able to make enough money to survive off of it, I guess the art is more important to me at the moment, has always been more important.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, I tried. I wasn't going to happen. I wasn't ambitious enough. I wasn't confident enough. I wasn't, I'd say even then I wasn't talented enough. I had no vision. I hadn't quite figured out what I was. I can see now, looking back on those photos, that I had something, that there's something in it that I realize now that I was doing that I wasn't aware I was doing. I thought I was just shooting, pretty haphazardly, just shooting all the time. Now when I look at the images, I can see there's a thread through it, like an aesthetic thread, and some little things. I think I talked to you maybe last time about kind of making people look at me all the time, which just to me was an embarrassment too. It's like, why do I need like someone to recognize, or to, it's like, it really, like, after years of therapy, I go like, oh, that's kind of fucked up that I need everybody to be looking right at me. Like I must feel like invisible, and I think I did, anyways,
was photography kind of like some sort of meditative state for you, or like a safe haven growing up? Anything like that?
I didn't do it until I moved, maybe just before I moved here. I saw my sister starting to get successful with it. And as a little brother, I was like, I want to do that. It was like a security blanket. If anything, that's what it was. I awkward in social situations, never quite, fit in when, say there's a group of people who are having fun. And it's like, I'm on the outside, and it was much easier to be on the outside with a camera than it was to be without. And coming from Los Angeles, where I was the same person, the same awkward person, but without the camera, it made me more comfortable in those situations. And I think in a way it made me less, I was still weird, but maybe less weird. But yeah, it's weird to think that like, I think because my sister, I was just like, I'm going to be a photographer. There's nothing in me before that I was really into movies. I think when I was a kid, I wanted to be a director, but I never made a movie, never even tried. So photography seemed like an easier entry into that sort of visual world. And I remember probably like everybody else in my generation getting a Polaroid and taking Polaroid pictures and just instantly being like, oh shit,
So was it weird when the shows that are going down are dedicated to you, dedicated to your work, dedicated to like this body of images that you've created over time, and they're just getting a bunch of attention, and then afterwards, like, the book does really well, but then you're doing stuff for Nike and you're on these shoots with these great people doing great things, and there's just this movement going down and you're a part of it. Does that feel strange for you? How is that? And how did that all unfold?
I mean, it's all because of Ben Solomon. So it does feel strange, but I've done it enough over the last couple of years, or maybe I guess year and a half, where now it doesn't feel as strange. The first thing that I got brought on for was just like Ben was doing a shoot. It was a Converse shoot, like an Iraq related one, and he wanted some behind the scenes stuff. And I think he had a photographer who fell through, and last second, it was like that morning, he's like, hey, you want to do this? I was like, yeah, okay. Then the next week he brought me on for something else. And then he brought me on for something else. And then pretty quickly I was in the fold with, him and his crew. And I was figuring it out, and the output was good. And, it was working, and but it happened organically, like anything else. I think the book made him aware that I was there again, in that sense, as a photographer rather than a restaurant owner. And he needed someone and called me. It just happened, I was available, of course. And but it's been amazing, like, to get to do that level of thing with so many great people, and to have enough time to shake off my, the dust, so to speak. In the beginning, it was a little rusty. I wasn't quite sure what to do. I had to figure so much out again. I really hadn't worked a lot up until that point. But to be able to get to do so many jobs in this short amount, in like a year or so, like by now, I feel like I really got a good lock on it. It's given me the practice I needed to kind of match, where I feel like I should be now, you can put out a book and I hadn't worked in, much in 15 years. So it's like, everyone can be like, oh, fucking, it's great. This is so great. But, it's not like there's money coming in. It's not about money. It never is with me. But to then get to do new work was equally important, I would say. And now that I'm getting to do it more and more, I love it. I really appreciate that I've been given the opportunity. And Ben had to be like, listen, fucking, you got to stop seeing yourself as, like, in a sense, like the help, not that, like, I have to see myself as like an artist, and I have to act like an artist. I'm not going to be like it's hard for me to be like it's very easy for me to be humble because I don't have, like, I have an ego, but my ego is kind of, it's always checked just by however I see myself in life and everything else. But it's been great to get to work so regularly and really figure out, like, a system for doing something, and to see it evolve and get better, and to see my work get better through this commercial work, because nothing else is happening other than me hanging out with my kid. My kids are getting older too. I'm not even hanging out at the park anymore with them. There was a long stretch where the only photography I took was them at the park, or them, at the beach or whatever. So it's good to get an opportunity to grow through through a job like this, and it's been just amazing opportunity.
Was it nerve-wracking at first? How did it feel?
Scary, it's still scary, but
Because you have like, it's different from shooting your friends at the park when you're doing
Yeah.
whatever the fuck you want, and it's completely your vision, it's completely your schedule, it's completely laid back, you know. And now here it's like there's a purpose, and there's like an artistic vision, and there's things that are trying to be gotten across, you know what I mean, like directly or indirectly. How did it feel to do that?
I mean, it's intimidating, but the good thing about what I've been doing is it's BTS, which is pretty much what I do anyways. And I feel like they recognized kind of from my photography and that I've been putting out that it would be a good match. So I still, you know, on these jobs, I'm still kind of left alone. There'll be a little bit of guidance when something's needed or they want something specific. But for the most part, I'm doing what I do. I kind of lurk around, you know. Try and stay out of people's way, try not to annoy Ben, try not to annoy the producers, and try and get great shots, which, you know, it's like I feel like I've been brought on because of who I am, and my weirdness, which always has seemed like a deficit to me, really works in my favor in these situations because it's trained me to be on the sidelines and kind of work from the weird angles and come in and recognize things. And I've always been watching. I sit, you know, rather than being so engaged in what everyone's talking about, it's more like I'm sitting there, I'm always listening, but I'm kind of watching, and I'm watching the light change, and I'm talking to you, and then something will happen, and I'm recognizing, and I'm waiting for my chance to get a photo, to break a conversation so that I can get in it, take a picture. Like it really works with this sort of job. And I feel like I'm made to do this in a way, like even though it's scary and there's more pressure, like it felt really natural, and I've been loving how the stuff's coming out. I mean, I couldn't be I've seen growth in my work, which, you know, as I'm 51, almost 52, I was, you know, I'm old, you know. I didn't think I would see this sort of like growth and be as pleased with the output I'm having now. And I feel lucky. I really do.
So your book is titled 2000 to 2005. A lot of your photos are from that time period. I want to hear about what it was like for you growing up then. What was New York like for you then? What was your day-to-day life like? And just who you were as a person. What was that all about?
I mean, I'd come from, when I moved here, I was 26, and I had been working at, you know, movie theaters in LA. I worked at the New Art Theater. I worked at LACMA. I was a projectionist. I was, you know, all these things that basically felt like, you know, I was going, they're not bad jobs, but I was basically going nowhere. I had no real idea of what I wanted to do. I was working just whatever job kind of fell into my lap, and I felt like I was already old at 26. Like I really thought that I was like, oh shit, all right, I'm done. And then I moved here. And all of a sudden it was just like everything started again, and it was fresh, and I felt young again. I was hanging out with it just was like instantly wild, like instantly like it. I'd say it took me about 6 months to find my way into the groups that I eventually kind of found, all, you know, through Graffiti, all through, you know, A-Life, all through, you know, kind of, you know, my sister, A-Life, Graffiti, all that kind of set me up to meet like a certain type of person, you know what I mean? And then once I did, I just kind of, the city was just really open. I had cheap rent. You know, my sister got, eventually I got my sister's rent stabilized apartment. So I was paying nothing. I worked at the Cock, you know, best money still to this day that I've ever made in my life. I was working 2 to 3 nights a week there. I was shooting pictures during the day, taking on party jobs at night. I mean, compared to how I was living in LA, I had no rent and I had more money than I ever had in my life. And then I was hanging out, you know, the ability to hang out most nights of the week and to not worry about going to work at 8 a.m., you know, and then falling in with the people I did. It just was great. Like it was just, I wish I could explain it a little better. I could talk about myself all day and my own, all the deep shit in my head the shit in my head that I think about all the time. But when it comes to that, it's almost like I'm seeing it through the photographs. Like it's like I'm remembering it without fully grasping kind of how it was, but I just know it was great. And it was a time when like everybody had big dreams, and their dreams kind of, whatever it was, they were that. It's like, I'm a photographer. No one's going to tell me, you're not a photographer. Maybe behind my back, they're like, he's a shitty photographer. But like, I was a photographer. So-and-so wants to be an artist. So-and-so is a DJ. So, it's like, and we really acted like, we were those people who were like, okay, fuck, I'm this. And there's nothing to say no. You just went around, like every day was just like some other adventure, some trouble to get into, so much fun. Max Fish was still there. We had all these places to just land, that were just so great. And it's like, I don't know if it's rose-colored glasses, but it really felt like a special moment. Not the best description, but
how much did graffiti play a part in your early life here? I know that you were connected with like AWR heads in LA, and like you already knew, what was it like? In some of your old photos, you see like GK, you see Two Tone. I think he has like gold teeth in the images.
Gold fronts. He got it right here on Canal Street.
Yeah, you see all this like, you were taking photos of Dash Snow, Kunle, and just like documenting the scene from that aspect as well.
Yeah.
But it was cool because a lot of your pictures of graffiti might not even be necessarily someone bombing, more so just like them actually living when they're not painting.
I mean, I got into AWR in 91, before I got into AWR, my friend Sonny Cokes, AWR, one of my best friends, got it. He was the first one of our group to get in. So by the time I moved here in 2000, I had already been like in the crew for 9 years. I wasn't active. I was never very good. But, I was surrounded by this amazing group of artists. I was there when GK got in AWR. We were high school. We were all in high school. It was like, from Saber to Tyke to Two Tone to, we're just kids who just happened to be brought together through this crew, different neighborhoods, but brought together through this crew. And then when I moved here, I'd moved to San Francisco for a brief time in 93. Same time, Bless, AWR moved there, Gone, AWR MSK. And we had this brief moment that I think was very similar to what I'd get here in 2000. Landed in San Francisco, and the city was just going off. Kehar, Twist, Reminisce, like, all of them. Bob Lickey, love Bob Lickey. And I got to see a moment there which very much paralleled the moment when I landed here, except for like, I think I went to San Francisco and I was very much an outsider. And then when I was here, I got welcomed in a different way. And what I'm thankful for is, graffiti, the people that my friends were friends with were, it's like when we had mutual friends, it was just kind of like, oh, you're, it was almost like you're vetted already. So I was welcomed in. Rob welcomed me in from A-Life. And then, it's just kind of that background just had me already in circles with other people with like a graffiti background, people probably more active, still active. Very quickly, like some AWR moved here at the same time I did. So he and I were kind of navigating, being new in the city, and he had a whole crew of people from San Francisco had moved out with him. And there was a huge influx of people from San Francisco in 2000. Then GK moved out. And it just like the group just kind of grew, it's like, met Dash along the way, Kunle, very out of nowhere. It was just like, come with me, took me in and welcomed me in. And then Kent, like Fanta, all that, it's like within the first year, I was like, those were my friends. When I first moved here, it was kind of like hanging out with my sister, hanging out with my sister's friends. And then very quickly I kind of landed with those guys. And then as I got more comfortable and kind of felt like more like as I was getting established, then like, I was hanging out with those guys. And then I, eventually met like Max Fish people, and, it just kind of grew from there.
And you were hanging out with legends.
Yeah.
You
I
know?
mean, but even at that time, and I said this in the first interview, like I knew they were legends then. You could see it. Like it was, the energy was there, and the energy was magnetic, and what I liked about New York is you could have so many, you could have, the person who's 10 years older from that, younger to older, like everybody was kind of mixed together. And
Something I think is crazy is how these groups of people kind of naturally produce amazing things. I'm explaining it terribly, but like thinking about AWR and MSK, and I'm thinking about how, you're down with them. Then there's Two Tone. So you're doing your stuff on the photography aspect, and you're putting out this book. It's getting a bunch of traction, having shows around the world for it, getting flown out here and there. Then you're doing stuff with Nike, and there's like a little piece of AWR in this thing.
Yeah.
But then Two Tone with all that he's doing, and Born and Raised, and the amount of influence they have on representing Los Angeles culture. Then you got GK and his strong pull in the graffiti world, and how much influence he's had to people all over the world through just like what he did writing graffiti. And how like you guys all probably met so long ago, such a different time period.
Yeah.
And it just naturally sprouted. Or even things like A-Life, like the people who came out of there, you can trace so many things back to like this one root. It's kind of weird to me how that occurs. Like I saw this picture of it was like, I think it was like KR, Espo, I think Kunle, Rob, and some others in a photo. I'm like, this is a fucked up photo. Like they're all super young and probably knew they were all going to do amazing things, but hadn't, or they had, but not to the scope of what they ended up doing. I'm like, this is crazy how as time passes, all this shit plays out, and then all these people are connected in this way from years past.
I've seen like, multiple times where you just need that one person or group of people to nurture, kind of like say with AWR, Eclipse, who's the leader of AWR, has been since I was a kid. Was a year older than I am, but he felt like he was like our uncle, you know what I mean? And he had a sense of kind of keeping the family together and nurturing the talent, and even letting someone like me in who wasn't as talented, but there was a place for me, you know what I mean? Like, and so much beauty that came out of that, AWR to MSK, all these things. And with A-Life, Rob and Arnaud and Tammy and I'm blank. I'm so sorry. It'll come to me, but it felt the same way. They were already somewhere. They were doing their thing already and kind of really creatively reinventing, connecting street to all these other elements, whether it be, doing streetwear or like design, all these things, but they nurtured this group of younger people who were hanging out, looking up to them, made us feel welcome, gave us opportunities, gave people shows, it's like, and then so much grew out of that, but you need to have that support system. I think about like skateboarding, I never had a group when I was a skater, and I never really got better because I never fell in with a group that could be like, nah, what the fuck are you doing, man? You got to do this or try it, but with, these scenes, like there really were those people who, Tony is the other person from A-Life. I don't want to forget him because he was so cool. They're all so cool. but they really made like a place for the kids coming up, and didn't like didn't look down on. They welcomed us, and they welcomed the creativity of the next round of kids. And like Eclipse, they weren't that much older than us. They seemed older than us because they were established and they were really doing important things. And I still think A-Life needs to be a full on, like, someone needs to tell the story of how much it impacted everything from that point. And how important that moment was, like in how far the tentacles had reached. But, it really, like they gave a space for all these other kids, and then these kids flourished. You know what I mean? They felt seen, and they were enabled to make art and to be creative, and kind of coached even, avoiding missteps, and it was a good mentorship. Like, and I don't even think they saw it like that. They were just being themselves,
Yeah, I guess everything has its timeline, but it's a shame that A-Life closed, and whatever happened with that is like, it sucks,
Yeah, I agree.
What was it like there when you first went there?
Oh, it's so cool. I was visiting, I think, when they first opened. I was here with Boo from AWR, and we couldn't believe it. They had a show. First show, if I remember correctly, was just panels on the wall, like a bunch of panels, and just tags. And like we were just couldn't believe that there was a store that was not just like a graph store. You know what I mean? It wasn't just like the scrapyard or the Hex's shop in LA, blanking, but like not only was there graffiti,
it was premium as fuck,
dude. It was so good.
Yeah,
and everything they did was amazing. The shirts, the graphics, like everything was just
magazine
so
ads,
good. Magazine,
so
ad.
good.
And then the people that were hanging around. I mean, I met Cap there. I met Stay High there. They were very much a bridge between they were the younger kids of the older generation, and they were fostering, making sure that these older guys were getting seen too, in the same way as giving us opportunities to kind of work and figure things out. And any day you went there, you just didn't know who you're going to hang out with. And in the same way that Max Fish was at night, I really see Max Fish and A-Life as serving a similar like social function, as well as being an amazing like place for creativity. You go there and you just didn't know. There's two benches outside. You sit down. There was always like the older, kind of more established people in the back, up top, and then we were down, like kind of the Groms were on the bottom. But you could sit there for hours and just kind of like so and so would stroll in, and in the same way that Tompkins happened, you'd end up like your day would get changed by who you bumped into, and it would lead to something like amazing. And 9 times out of 10 would end up being something that the next day you'd just be like, holy shit. Waking up and reflecting on a night back then was the best. Like full hangover. First, like wake up, do an assessment of what fucked up things you could have done to be held responsible for, because that shit happened. And it's like, what did I do? Then, Rolodex is clear, and then just kind of laugh at this, whatever insane shit happened the night before. I mean, it was the best. And I'm sure that shit still happens today. I hope it does. I just can only speak like it just, I have not experienced that. I don't experience that anymore. It was that time in my life where I got to do that. And it was like, the days were just like, start at Tompkins or A-Life, end up Max Fish, end up at a fashion party, end up at a magazine party. There was so much money in the city, and like up until about 2008 when everything crashed, it's like everything was free. Film was free back then because I worked for these magazines. So, there was always extra film floating around, extra Polaroid. I got a free box of Polaroid film one time that I spent 2 years shooting. Drinks were free. There was a great barter system. I worked at bars. I'd look after people. I would get looked after. So great.
It's like some village shit.
Yeah, really.
Some like primal village shit going down.
And the beauty that I see in New York, hopefully it still happens, is New York is so expensive that that's a way of offsetting some of the cost. You look after each other, and I hope it still happens that way.
How do you think social media changed things? Like, all these photos, a lot of their value comes from the accumulation over time of memories that otherwise would have been forgotten about. And also they haven't been seen. So then boom, you see them all at once and you're like, whoa, you step into this world. You open the door and you just step into this fucking world. Um, with social media, for the most part, first of all, I think photos become like, you have infinite. I could take infinite on my phone and I might never look back on them. But with the film and with the creates a limit. Of course, you could always buy more film, but there is more of a limitation than there is with the iPhone. And also, you're sharing it more. There's more documentation. News spreads faster. All things which kind of take away, in my opinion, or could take away, but could also add to the primal village aspect of like there's this small community, we're here doing our thing in our own little island, we're documenting it amongst each other. It's not really a worldwide thing yet, and it's not supposed to be. It's supposed to be, for us. So do you think that changed anything? How does that change your work?
I mean, I mean, everything changed. I mean, completely changed. It's completely different. Back then, no one was seeing anything. It was very hard to get your work seen. And if you got work seen, it generally wasn't like of an artistic nature. Some people did. Ryan did, of course, but I didn't. If I got work seen, it was like a small photo in a fashion magazine. Maybe if I'm lucky, I shot a lot of do's and don'ts. Those would get seen, but I wasn't.
For Vice, right?
Yeah, shot a lot for Vice in the beginning when I first got here, and also another magazine.
I want to hear about the do's and don'ts, but after
Yeah.
I want to finish your idea. Sorry.
The someone, and I think it was actually Ted Barrow who said, you got these pictures taken. You didn't expect someone would take a picture of you. You didn't expect to see it again. Maybe if you're lucky, it would end up in like a party section in a magazine. So, like a paper magazine or something, you know what I mean? And that could happen, but the likelihood was that it would just be gone. You don't even think about it after that point. Now, with social media, like, I noticed that people like, I mean, not just social media, people are there's more to be feared now of what's revealed or what's seen or how it's put out there. And so people have to be more guarded. The idea that everyone has a camera versus just 5 of you having a camera and maybe only 2 of you at a party, it takes away from kind of your importance there. Because back then it meant something, to be a photographer. Like it was kind of, for as much as there is to learn about photography, and that would be a barrier to entry for most people. The idea of being a photographer seemed harder than for me, how it actually was, because I was basically a point and shoot photographer, whether or not I was using a big SLR or not. But to the people at the party, you're there because you have a skill that you've learned and trained yourself in. It's like you have an important role, whether or not they're going to be seen or not. We all wanted to be seen. We all wanted to have our pictures end up in those magazines. It was validation. But there wasn't the feeling that those pictures were going to be something that could hurt you until Vice with the do's and don'ts. Then that, even though it was just kind of a dig, if you ended up in the don'ts, it could hurt your self-esteem. It wasn't going to lose you your job. But I could see when that started, people were starting to like question whether or not like they wanted me to take a photo. And I started to get asked all the time if it was going to end up in the don'ts, whether they knew I shot for that magazine or not. So I could kind of see how that was leading into where we are now, where now it's like, you do something that we probably done a million times, something stupid, never like the level of stupidity we did that, it's like the typical drunk asshole, being loud, you know what I mean? Kind of taking offense when you don't need to. But someone's there with a camera now, it's, potentially can be, it goes out there in the world, you don't know what's going to happen. So I sense now people are more guarded. They're more in charge. They want to be in charge of their own image. They have their own social media. They're less like interested in kind of being at someone else's, mercy, I guess, even if you mean well. They don't know that.
Sometimes I wonder how it's changed the human, because you have your own little like TV show on
Yeah.
social media. You have your own little fantasy world that's like a fucking fantasy, somewhat tied to reality, but you're gonna show the illest parts pretty much, you know what I mean? And then that drives you to do some things just for the sake of showing it, whereas before, when you can't show it, a lot of the things might be a means to an end a little bit more, because you're not about to show it, you're doing this because you want to live the experience. In terms of the do's and don'ts, was that just because I've heard about it and I've seen it online and shit like that, but it was just like fashion wise, or
Not necessarily. It could be anything. It was Gavin. Gavin did the do's and don'ts. Gavin was the one who wrote everything, and it was really funny, really cutting. Even when you were a do, it didn't mean it was like you were a do for things that you liked. It could, both sides could be equally, you could get laughed at as a do as just as much as you could a don't. But it was really just kind of, Gavin's take on like whatever his comedic take on whatever it was that was brought to the table. And they were, at that time, it was really important. Vice was really important. Vice was and I told you this last time, Vice put on everybody, it's almost everybody that I knew. It was their first, the first person who gave them a chance. And having Ryan on as the photo editor was huge, for us, like, and dictating culture back then, Vice was, very important. As much as, I talk about A-Life, I talk about Max Fish, Vice was equally there, in that moment, kind of dictating the culture of what was cool in New York.
Yeah.
And it was my first, I got my first profile in Vice, and I was shooting do's and don'ts, a lot of the do's and don'ts, never all of them, because there was a bunch of people doing it. But I shot a lot of them because I was already out shooting for my sister. So then I'd see something that I thought was funny. I'd take a picture of somebody who, something I liked, something I thought was funny, whatever. And then just kind of drop them off and, wait till the next magazine came out to see how many got in. I did some of my first actual like jobs for them, never paid. But we wanted to be part of that in the same way we wanted to be part of all these other things, because creatively it seemed like they were giving opportunities that it seemed like coming as a first, like coming to New York and landing, it seemed like almost like it was going to be your first chance. It was like, I think Purple magazine or some of those other magazines also, but those are the ones you went to first, because as an up and comer, like they were willing to take you on.
When did things change in your life, in terms of stepping away from the being out there every day, stepping away from partying, stepping away from hanging out, stepping away from just hanging out at Tompkins, and Max Fish and these places? When did things start to change?
When the restaurant opened. So 2007, it was basically, once that started, it was done,
Just because you had to, really pop it off and make it work.
Yeah. And it was more work than I had ever done in my life, and continued that way forever. I'm not there as much now, but it's still, my wife, it's still as much work. It just took us out, it took us out of, we were no longer able to go out all the time. We were there pretty much every day that we were open. And then, it's very stressful, a lot of time, a lot of energy. And then had kids after that. And it was like, once you have kids too, it's like too tired. We were already too tired from the restaurant. Then we had kids. And it really wasn't until the book came out that I even considered kind of going out. And that brought me back in a really nice way at the right time. But, also 2007, between 2000 and 2010, so many of my friends left New York. So many people that we were really close to moved to LA. And then all of a sudden what was happening here seemed to be happening on the West Coast. But we had the restaurant. We weren't going anywhere. So there's just a group of us who were still here that would see each other. Like the restaurant became, you know, a meeting place for those of us who were still left, who were getting older, who, you know, it's like A-Life's gone, you know, Max Fish eventually was still there in 2007, but eventually was gone. And then I was like, oh, fuck, let's go to Bacaro, you know. And so even now on Monday nights, you know, we have Mark Razzo, who's, you know, Tino Razzo's brother, Andre Razzo's brother, Max Fish. You know, we do a night which we call Max Fish Monday, where it's just kind of, you know, us old heads who are still in New York can kind of come together and hang out. And it feels like it did before. And there's still a great group of people still here, still being creative, still, you know, pushing through, even though it's hard and getting harder for most of us. Thank God Mark's still here. Salt of the earth, you know, best guy, unifier of everybody. You know, you know, 2000, 2007, that was my time. Like, at least to be young in New York.